Although the Apple team in the US is largely responsible for the iPhone's development, its parts may be found in many other nations. With more than 300 businesses producing iPhone components, China is the leading iPhone supplier. Here in the People's Republic, the majority of the factories that produce iPhone components and whole device assembly are situated. It is the perfect location to manufacture an iPhone, characterized by cheap labor costs and a huge, highly skilled workforce, and almost every other device. China's enormous and unheard-of industrial capacity estimates that 99 million people worked in factories in 2009, assisted in making the country's economy the second largest in the world. After the very first iPhone was transported, the company that has accounted for the majority of manufacturing is Foxconn. It has almost 300,000 workers. Hello and welcome back to the channel. Today we'll be taking a look at the Apple factories located in China and discussing the producing of iPhones in these factories. Before we begin, please consider subscribing and pushing the notification bell to be notified of the latest updates. Done? Alright then, let's begin. Number 1. The making of iPhone. East Asia and Southeast Asia are the key locations for iPhone manufacturers, where labor costs are low and supply is high. These qualities may be found in China, Taiwan, Thailand, Vietnam, the Philippines, Malaysia, and Indonesia, which are the primary nations producing iPhones. Although several Asian nations construct iPhones, China is the major location for iPhone manufacturing. According to estimates, manufacturers in China, which have certain significant advantages over manufacturing in the US, build more than 80% of iPhone 5S. Shanghai, close to Jiangsu Province, and southern Guangdong Province have more Apple supply factories than any other region in the nation, according to TechNode's analysis of Apple supplier list. 1/3 of all Apple plants globally and 61% of our factories in China are located in those three regions. Foxconn is a Taiwanian-based business that specializes in putting together electrical products. It produces the most iPhones worldwide. The incredible assembly line is one of the main benefits. On its assembly line, Foxconn's facility is predicted to be able to accommodate more than 200,000 people and create more than 50,000 iPhone 5 rear panels per day. Due to its great production efficiency, Foxconn has been producing iPhones for many years. Another significant supplier of MacBooks to Apple, situated in Shanghai, is Quanta. The business informed Nikkei Asia that it has ceased manufacturing as of the beginning of April in order to adhere to local government COVID-19 measures. Ming-Chi Kuo, an Apple analyst, claims that Pegatron, Apple's second-largest electronics manufacturing service provider, has also closed its doors in Kunshan and Shanghai. Number 2. Accepts challenges. There is an interesting story that explains the efficiency of assembly plants in China. In 2007, just a few weeks before its release, Steve Jobs decided to adopt a glass screen for the iPhone. Most American companies said that the job was impossible. However, one Chinese factory took on the job by first building a house so that workers could work in shifts for 12 hours. When the deal was signed, 8,000 workers woke up from sleep, were given biscuits and tea, and began building 10,000 iPhones a day by incorporating glass panels into their iPhones. When working in the United States, it took months to get all the workers, while in China it took only a few days. The manufacturing of the iPhone has multiple social impacts on Chinese society. Apple has quit many manufacturing jobs in China because Chinese workers can assemble iPhones more efficiently. As many people struggle to work in China, the iPhone manufacturing industry is increasing employment in China to some extent. However, the jobs offered by these factories are often very stressful, as factories in China need to ensure the efficiency of iPhone assembly. In 2010, more than 10 people died at Foxconn. Most did so because of the high pressure inside the factory. To meet the manufacturing needs of the iPhone, they always have to work overtime, a total of 12 hours of work per day, which then makes them tired. So while the iPhone manufacturing industry does provide jobs for the Chinese, it also has a negative impact that shouldn't be ignored. Assembling is the least valuable part of iPhone production, so it will not bring great benefits to the Chinese economy. Chinese companies are said to get only a few dollars to assemble an iPhone. It's a shocking fact considering that the phone is worth more than $500. As a result, Chinese companies are now trying to develop their own brands and technologies to make more profit. Interestingly, iPhone manufacturing not only creates more jobs for Chinese companies, but also indirectly encourages Chinese companies to innovate to generate more profit. Number 3. Foxconn's factory. The massive Foxconn in Zhangzhou, China produces half of all iPhones sold worldwide. With up to 350,000 employees, it created a mini city that residents call iPhone City. If you have an iPhone, you may have obtained it from the Foxconn factory in China. The company employs 300,000 people at the facility. Work is monotonous for many, but the presence of Foxconn outside the factory has turned a nearby home into a mecca for activity and entertainment. The area around the Foxconn factory in Zhangzhou was once mainly a base for agricultural business, but now as developers build new homes and shops, it's at the center of growth. Wojin Commercial Square is a newly built building with high-rise condominiums and new shops and an atmosphere like an outdoor mall. However, assembly line workers often have tight budgets. The monthly base salary for new workers can start at 1,800 won. In other words, workers need to rely on overtime to increase their income. In leisure, workers said cheap internet cafes were a popular destination. Others like to play sports in apartments. At 6:30 p.m. when the day shift is over, hundreds of workers spilled out of the factory building and a large crowd gathered. The entrance and surrounding streets are crowded with cars, buses, and scooters while staff prepares dinner. Although rare, suicides have occurred at Foxconn factories, including Zhangzhou. In some cases, the deceased family protested outside the facility and asked Foxconn to apologize. Last June, a family raised a banner and attracted a large number of workers. Foxconn said suicide is a complex problem and cannot be given a single reason. Number 4. iPhone City. China's Zhangzhou, deep in central China, the enormous box-shaped customs office serves as a thriving commercial island. To count, weigh, scan, and certify goods, government employees in well-pressed uniforms rush through a maze of tall stacks of wooden pallets. Unmarked vehicles line up for a mile to await the arrival of the next shipment for Beijing, New York, London, and several other locations. The cutting-edge factory was constructed a few years ago to cater to a single international exporter. The most valuable corporation in the world right now is Apple, which is also one of the biggest merchants in China. According to more than 100 interviews with plant workers and official papers that were confirmed by the New York Times, clever customs processes are only one of China's many tax breaks and hidden benefits that enable the largest iPhone manufacturer in the world. The iPhone, Apple's most popular and lucrative device, is based on a $1 billion bundle of incentives and sweeteners. Everything revolves on Zhangzhou, a 6 million person metropolis in underdeveloped parts of China. Foxconn, Apple's production partner, owns and runs the facility, which is operating at full capacity and producing 500,000 iPhones a day. Now Zhangzhou residents refer to it as iPhone City. To demonstrate their efforts, municipalities gave Foxconn more than $1.5 billion to develop facilities and the majority of the neighboring staff housing. It has constructed a power plant and paved the road. This aids in defraying operating expenses for transportation and energy. It is seeking an employee for an assembly line. The manufacturer receives a bonus if it meets its export goal. Number 5. Production schedule. Despite an increase in the number of new COVID-19 cases being sold in the landlocked nation of Henan, the largest iPhone plant in the world, run by Foxconn Technology Group in Zhangzhou, central China, continues to produce iPhones on time. The multiple Foxconn manufacturing lines activities, formerly known as Hanhai Precision Industry, were unaffected by recent outbreaks, according to employees of the two companies, who spoke on condition of anonymity. They confirmed a report by Chinese media outlet Yakai on Tuesday, citing Foxconn representatives saying that the pandemic has not affected capacity so far. Number 6. Workers of iPhone City. The massive manufacturing complex, which is made up of sunlit warehouses, all-grade dormitories, and Shenzhen's megalopolis, blends in without a trace. Apple goods are mostly produced in Foxconn's enormous Langhua facility, the factory with the highest renown worldwide. It can also be the one that is shut off and most private. Every entrance is overseen by security personnel. Without swiping their ID, employees cannot enter. Drivers operating a van have fingerprints on them. When Reuters reporters tried to take images beyond the plant walls, they were once pulled out of the car and physically assaulted. Caution noticed outside, this factory's location was formerly chosen with government consent. It is not allowed to intrude. Criminal prosecution of offenders is handled by the police. Many of them are hostile than people found outside of China's military sites. Number 7. Suicides in iPhone City. Today, the iPhone is manufactured in various factories across China, but for years, when it wasn't the world's best-selling product, 450,000 employees formerly resided at the enormous plant. Foxconn, as you're likely to have heard of suicide. In 2010, workers on the Ryuka assembly line began suicide. Workers threw themselves out of the towering dorm building, sometimes in the daytime in tragic despair and protesting internal working conditions. This year alone, 18 suicide attempts have been reported and 14 deaths have been confirmed. The epidemic has caused a turmoil in the media, the state of suicide and exploitation at the iPhone's home. Farewell letters and survivors talk about immeasurable stress, long working days, and harsh managers who tend to humiliate workers for mistakes, unreasonable fines, and promises of unfulfilled profits. The company's reaction further fueled anxiety. Foxconn CEO Terry Gu has set up large nets in front of many buildings to catch the fallen bodies. Consultants and workers hired by the company had to sign a promise not to attempt suicide. When asked about the number of deaths, Steve Jobs said, "This is the end," noting that Foxconn's suicide rate is in line with the national average. Critics welcome the comments, although technically correct. Foxconn Longhua is a very large and could be a nation-state of its own country with a suicide rate comparable to that of China. The distinction is that Foxconn is a nation-state entirely controlled by a single corporation that also happens to make one of the most lucrative goods in the whole world. Because of the complexity and small size of the iPhone, properly assembling the iPhone requires a huge assembly line of hundreds of people building, inspecting, testing, and packaging each device. An employee said that every day, 1,700 iPhones were in their possession. She was in charge of cleaning off the display's distinctive sheen. This equates to roughly 3 screens each minute for a full 12-hour day. The pace of the more precise labor, like repairing the chipboard and putting the bag together, has slowed. Every iPhone of these workers has a minute. However, 600 to 700 iPhones are produced per day. Your supervisor may publicly criticize you if you don't reach quotas or make mistakes. Most of the time, employees are supposed to be quiet, and if they ask to use the restroom, their employer could discipline them. 10 years ago, 150 people gathered on the roof and threatened to jump. They received promises of reform and management discussion. They essentially threatened suicide as a negotiating tactic. 2016 saw a smaller group repeat the action. Soon after, 7 or 8 workers congregated on the roof and threatened to jump if the ostensibly withheld rightful wages weren't paid. The workers were debated, and eventually Foxconn consented to pay the salaries. Well, that was all for the Apple factory in China. If you liked it, please consider subscribing and pushing the notification bell to never miss any new updates. And while you're at it, why not share with your friends? With that said, I'll see you in the next one.